And she texted me back like 5 minutes later, and she's like, Stephanie, I've been sitting here staring at his face for 5 minutes, and he is absolutely your father. There is no way that you look just like him.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an Ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 97. I am just a few weeks away from my 100th episode, and I'm just truly grateful for everyone that has come on the show and shared their story. Some have been beautiful, some have been heartbreaking. We all are just at a different place in our NPE journey. And so I'm really grateful for everyone that's come on, and I'm going to have something a little different here for episode 100. We will see how it goes. The wait list is getting long again. You are still welcome to email me. I slowly go through each individual email and I get back in touch with everyone. You do not need to write me your whole story. I do not vet out who comes on the show and who doesn't. It's literally in the order of emails received. You do not need to be a professional speaker. You do not need to be an author of any sort. Really, the only requirement is that you are an NPE and you have experienced some sort of misattributed parentage in your life, and you want to share wherever you are today. This also includes LDAs, which are late discovery adoptees, people that have found out late in life they are adopted. Also DCIs or DCPs, an acronym that we use for donor-conceived individual or a donor-conceived person, where it wasn't told to them as a child that they were donor conceived, and they had the shock of finding that out late in life. Very traumatizing. And lastly, NPEs. The acronym also is MPE, and this can go by not parent expected, non-paternal event, misattributed parentage. Sometimes you have found out through a DNA test or maybe an admission later in life as an adultee, the traumatizing, life-changing news that who you thought were your parents or parent actually wasn't. And that's what we talk about here on this show. So right now we are going to get into someone's story today, an NPE story today. And I am happy to welcome Steph P. Hi, Steph.
Hi, Lily.
You go by Steph, correct? Not Stephanie?
Yeah, Steph or Stephanie, either one's fine.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. And thank you so much for producing this podcast and putting all this effort in, because it's really, really helped me as I've sort of tried to untangle my NPE situation. I think I've listened to every single episode. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Good. I'm glad. It does take a few hours. And so it's always nice to hear that. I appreciate it.
Oh, and also I was just going to thank everybody who's come before me and shared their stories, because even though all of our stories are a little different, the circumstances are different. Hearing them has really helped a lot. And so thank you to everybody else who's shared.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I feel that same way. That's so nice to say. Okay, Steph, although I initially kind of read your email, I try not to. I like to kind of go in with a blank slate so I can just authentically listen. So I don't really remember your story today. So why don't you start at the beginning and take it from there and kind of start with what your original family was like?
Sure. So I found out I was an NPE on December 24th, 2020. So it was kind of an interesting zinger at the end of a year that had kind of been sort of a shit show for everybody on the planet, myself included. So it was, in a way, sort of funny. It wasn't funny, but it was just sort of funny that at that point at the end of the year, I've made this discovery. So it's been maybe 10 months since I have known that I'm an NPE.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Starting on New Year's, or I'm sorry, Christmas Eve, and then, oh,
Yeah.
COVID, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. Actually, COVID had something to do with me figuring this out. And I'll get into that later when I tell how I discovered it, part of my story. But, because I was homebound and working on my family tree and ancestry, that's how I decided to take the test and everything. So in a way, COVID is partially responsible for me
Mhm.
having the time
Mhm.
and getting into this and figuring it out. So my family background. So I'm 51 years old now. I was 50 when I made this discovery, and so I was born in January of 1970. And my mom was 20 years old when she had me, and 19 when she became pregnant. And my dad was 26, and they were married. Um, and I was their first and only child. Um, my dad he'd already finished college and he had a good job as an engineer, and he was on the verge of going to law school. So he was on a very sharp upwards trajectory. And my mom, even though she was only 20, she was in college as well, and her parents lived close by. So they kept me a lot when I was a baby and a toddler. And so my mom was also able to finish school and go on and have a good career. So I was really born into a really good situation. My parents had gotten married about 5 months before I was born. They got married in August of 1969. And I remember when I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old, when I was old enough to know that it takes like 9 months to bake a baby, basically. I remember asking my mom, like, did you guys get married just because of me? And she said, "Oh no, no, honey, we were totally in love, and we were get married anyway. It's just that you came along a little sooner than anticipated, and we decided to we just had to accelerate everything." And that was like a perfectly acceptable answer to me, right? It was a great answer. And
Mhm.
because my parents were very much in love. I mean, I had a wonderful childhood. I was cherished and loved by both of my parents, both sets of grandparents. We really had no drama or anything in my family. Um, so I was very fortunate in that way. However, dot dot dot. When I was in high school, their marriage did start to deteriorate, and I think I was 17, my junior year of high school. My dad left. He left my mom, and that was really hard. She was really heartbroken, and I think kind of blindsided by the whole thing. And they ended up having a pretty contentious divorce. It took a few years for their divorce to become final, but like a lot of divorces, it sort of devolved into a big fight about money. And then when I was at this point, by the time their divorce was final, I was off at college myself, and my dad got remarried. My dad, when I say dad, I mean birth certificate father. He got remarried when I was like 20, 21 years old and started a new family. So I was an only child, but I have two half sisters who are 22 and 24 years younger than me. So I'm more like an auntie to them than I am a
Mhm.
sister, because we didn't really grow up we didn't never live together. We have different moms, and I'm so much older than them.
Mhm.
Um, so my dad, my birth certificate father, he and I had a good relationship when I was a child, but I wouldn't say I was like a daddy's girl, right? He was really focused on his career, and so I didn't spend a ton of time with him. But he was a good dad. Like he sort of checked all the boxes, right? Like he taught me how to ride a bike, and helped me with my homework, and showed up at the dance recitals and the school plays. And, so, so I had a good relationship with him up until about this point when he and my mom got divorced. I was definitely on her side, if you will. So throughout my adult life, I've had a sort of a cordial, but I'd say distant relationship with my dad. my birth certificate father. I still see him a couple times a year. We send birthday cards and Father's Day cards and things like that, but I would say I'm terribly close to him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my family composition. And my mom actually, after they got divorced, she ended up getting remarried about 10 years later. And so she's happily remarried and has been for over 20 years. So things worked out really for the best, I think, for both of them in the end. Like they both ended up married to other people who are a better fit for them than they would have been for themselves. So it all kind of worked out. But I was an only child. So I think one of the differences between me and a lot of the other NPEs who share their stories is I had no idea. I never felt different or other. Like a lot of NPEs talk about how either they didn't look like their siblings or either one of their parents, or they just were different. Like their personalities were very different or their interests, or they just never really felt like they fit in. But I never had that feeling ever because I was an only and I didn't have anybody to compare myself to. And I don't think anybody else in my family knew. So my birth certificate father and his parents and that side of my family, I never felt like they treated me differently.
Yeah, I guess being an only child, you can't really make those comparisons. I get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Um, and I don't think I was treated any different than my cousins by my grandparents, or anything like that. Um, so yeah, I really honestly had no idea. I look a lot like my mom and her side of the family. Not exactly. I definitely have some features that are not like hers, but I look so much like her side of the family that I just sort of thought that's the way the DNA cookie crumbled, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we all know people who strongly favor one parent over the other. And obviously I don't look anything like my birth father, but I just thought that was the way it worked out for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, so flash forward to 2017. In 2017, I took a 23andMe test. I had like two or three friends take the 23andMe DNA test and be like, oh my God, this is so cool. And you get to see your ancestry and all these traits. And this is so neat. And I remember being out to coffee with a friend, and she actually brought out her mobile phone and showed me the 23andMe app. And she was like showing me her results. So I was like, oh, that's neat. I'm going to do that. So I took the 23andMe test. So this was like 4 years ago. And I got my results back, and the little pie chart of my ancestry was pretty much what I expected it to be. And I mean, I was like classified as like 30% broadly Northern European. So but the rest of it was tied to specific countries, and that made sense. It was what I expected. And I glanced at my DNA matches, but I didn't see anything weird, right? Like the closest match I think I had was like a second cousin, and I recognized all of their names. So I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't dig any deeper than just sort of glancing at the top 5 or 6 matches, right? And they all made sense to me. So I didn't think anything of it. And then over the last 3 or 4 years, every once in a while, I'll get an email from 23andMe saying, hey, you've got new DNA relatives. And sometimes I'll click through and check them out. And it's usually like third cousins, fourth cousins, and people who I wouldn't know who they are anyway, right? So there was really no indication there at all that I was about to uncover like a crazy family secret. So flash forward now to 2020. And because of COVID, I've got more downtime, right? We're pretty much trapped at home. I have 2 children. My son is 12 and my daughter is 10. And my son's in 6th grade. So he's starting to learn American history, like, colonies and Revolutionary War and all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm curious about my own genealogy because I only know maybe a generation or two above me. And I thought it would be really cool to join Ancestry and map out our family tree and show my kids. So it would make learning American history a little more meaningful if they knew how many generation American we are, or the names of our early ancestors who first came here and where did they come in? Did they come in, through Jamestown? Where did they settle? Like, did they fight in the Revolutionary War? Those sorts of things. So I joined the monthly Ancestry subscription where you get access to all of the records. And I started building out my tree. And then, of course, at this point, I'm totally sucked into the marketing vortex of Ancestry, right? Like they know who I am, So I'm like, every time I log on to Ancestry to work on my family tree, I'm getting a pop-up offering their DNA test. I'm getting emails from them. Every time I go on social media, I'm seeing ads from Ancestry about their DNA test. Like they were pushing hard, right, for me to take this DNA test. And in the beginning, I resisted because I'm like, no, I don't need to spend the money. I already took that 23andMe test. I already know what my ancestry is. I don't need to take their test too, right?
Yep.
As I was getting deeper into mapping out my family tree, I could see that on Ancestry, there's this nifty feature where if you have taken their DNA test, you can see how you're connected to your living DNA matches through your ancestors in your tree, right? So you can kind of really see exactly how you match to somebody through what ancestor are you connected. And I thought that was really cool. So one day they gave me a screaming deal on a test and I ordered it. And then it sat on my kitchen counter for like 3 months because I wasn't that eager to take the test, right? I'd already taken the 23andMe test and I kind of got into like a Marie Kondo decluttering organizational frenzy one day. And I'm like, I have got to get this box off of my kitchen counter. So I finally took the Ancestry DNA test and sent it in. Got my results back pretty quickly. And, the first thing I did was I looked at the pie chart of my ancestry, and it was pretty much the same thing as what I had seen on 23andMe. But then I clicked on my matches, my DNA matches. And this is where it gets interesting. At the very, very top of my list of matches was a woman whose name I didn't recognize. And she was classified, it said closest relative. And then underneath that, it said first cousin. And I'm like, ooh, okay. I don't know who she is, but maybe I did uncover a family secret. So I call my mom and I'm like, hey, do you know this name? By chance, does anybody in our family have a child that we don't know about? Is there a family secret that I wasn't told? And she's like, no, I have no idea who that is. I've never heard that name before. And my mom's has an older brother who's my only biological uncle. So I kind of was thinking when I first looked at this that this woman might be his child. So my mom's like, no, I don't know. So at that point, I'm like, okay, this person is a cousin. If she reaches out to me and asks me to connect her with my family, I will help her. But I'm not going to reach out to her because I don't want to stir anything up. I don't know who she is and how, I just don't want to be the instigator of any family drama that might come after this discovery, right? So I just kind of like let it sit for a while. But of course, like curiosity got the better of me. And one day I was in the Ancestry tool working on my tree, and I went over and clicked on this mystery cousins record, and I actually opened up her full profile, which I hadn't done before. And at the top it said she could either be a first cousin, a half sister, or an aunt. And then I was like, no, wait a minute, what? Right? Like that actually makes a difference to me. If I have a half sister, I want to know her. Right? Like that's kind of a bigger deal to me for some reason. And so I'm like, I've got to figure out who this is. So I then tried to find her online, and I couldn't find anything for her on Facebook. Thankfully, she had a very, very uncommon last name. Very uncommon. Like I'd never heard this name before. So when I just did a straight Google search on her name, the first search result that came up was like a Roderis listing. It's kind of like a white pages page where they kind of list all the people in the US with that name. And there were only 2 women in the United States with her first and last name. And it said they were both in their mid 70s. So at this point, I'm like, well, wait a minute, then she can't be a cousin or a half sister because she's basically the same age as my dad / birth certificate father. And she's only maybe 3 or 4 years younger than my uncle and my aunts and she can't be a cousin. It's just the ages don't work out like that. So the second listing that came up was her mother's obituary. So this woman's name is Linda, right? This mystery aunt. Now I've figured out she must be an aunt. Her name is Linda. So I found her mother's obituary, and as we know, obituaries are a gold mine of information.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm reading her mother's obituary, and it's like Columbus, 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 Columbus. And my mom was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and I have tons of extended family there. My grandparents born and raised in Ohio. I was born in Ohio, although when I was little, we moved to Washington, D.C., which is my hometown. But I'm like, this has to do with my mom and her side of the family, because my dad, who at this moment I thought was my biological dad, he's from California and his whole family lived here. He didn't have any family connections in Ohio. So I'm like this. So I called my mom right away and I'm like, I think this woman might be an aunt. And it's clear that she's from Ohio. So this is some connection to your family. You know, what's interesting about this is like, it didn't occur to me, like I think anybody else at this point would say, oh my God, maybe her brother is your father, right? But I couldn't even think that. That wasn't even in the menu of possibilities in my brain at this point, because I so believed that my dad was my dad, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking, I instantly went to thinking there must have been some funny business a generation, two generations above me, like my grandparents or something, right?
Yeah.
That's where I went in my head, but I didn't know how. I couldn't figure it out. So I called my mom again, and she knew I'd taken the DNA test because I'd called her before when I first found this when I first found Linda. And I'm like, hey, I think this woman has to be an aunt. And so, and I found her mom's obituary. So my mom is on the phone with me in real time. She's like, okay, why don't you read me the obituary? So I'm reading Linda's mom's obituary to my mom on the phone. And I get a paragraph or two in, and my mom's like, oh my gosh, I know that family. They live down the street from us. And their son is my age. He and I went to school together. And I had a really huge crush on him when we were in high school. She like
Oh.
punctuated with that. I'm like, huh, interesting. Again, didn't raise any suspicions. I'm, not thinking at all that this boy, the younger sister of Linda, could possibly be my father, But my mom dropped a really big hint, which I think is interesting. But anyway, I continue reading the obituary to her, and it's talking about the church that this family went to. And my mom's like, oh my gosh, my parents went to that church too. So my mom comes up with this theory, which circumstantially made perfect sense, that her parents and, Linda's parents, they were all around the same age. They went to the same church. They were neighbors. So my mom comes up with this theory that her father, so my maternal grandfather, must also be Linda's father. She comes up with a theory that her father must have had an affair with Linda's mother to produce Linda.
Mm.
So that was hard to hear because I loved my grandparents dearly, and the thought of my grandfather cheating on my grandma and having a child outside of their marriage and all of that, and wondering, like, did she know or whatever, was a little bit unnerving. But all of them they're all gone. They've all passed away, decades ago. So we'll never know. And I bought it. It made sense to me. Like, circumstantially, it just made perfect sense. So I bought that theory. But as they say, the DNA does not lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I believed it. And then a few weeks later, I was back in Ancestry and I clicked on Linda's profile again. And what I noticed was that, so I had a number of other close matches who were like first cousins, once removed, second cousins on my mom's side of the family, who I know in real life. Like, I know their names, and they showed up as like my second, third, and fourth closest matches, basically. And they are direct descendants of my grandfather. And I could see that Linda did not share any DNA with them. There was they didn't have any DNA in common. So I'm like, how can she be the daughter of my grandfather, yet his great granddaughter and great nieces and nephews don't have any DNA in common with her. How is
Yeah.
that possible? Right?
Yeah.
So I could see this, but I'm like, I don't, am I looking at this wrong? Of course I instantly go to like questioning myself, right? And whether or not I am, because I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like I've never, done any kind of genealogy or looked at this before. It bothered me, but I didn't have time to really dig deeper and figure it out, right? Like again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I have an intense corporate job. I'm working from home. My two kids are home 100% of the time doing Zoom school. And so like, I just can't, it bothered me, but I really didn't have time to like dig deep enough to figure it out. And plus I didn't really know what I was doing either. I was kind of frustrated with what I was seeing. So I just let it sit. And I would, I log for the next like 6 or 8 weeks. I'd log into Ancestry maybe once a week just to see if like a new match popped up or something that would like help explain what I was looking at. So come holiday season, and this is why I guess I figured this out on December 24th, heading into Christmas, I had 2 weeks off from work. My kids had school off, right? And I'm like, you know what? And we're home, like it's COVID. So we can't travel. We don't have anybody visiting us. So what would normally be a very busy few weeks were really quiet. It was just, kind of me and my kids trying to make the most of it. But I had a lot of downtime. So I'm like, this is going to be my project over the holidays because it's bugging me and I need to figure it out. And I'm going to just be like really methodical and I'm going to go in here and figure this shit out. Right. So one of the things that I had not done yet is I really hadn't spent much time on my dad's side of the tree, building out his family, which I thought it was my family at this point. So I started out and I spent a day or two really building out my dad / birth certificate father's side of the tree. And I was looking at like a very zoomed out view of my whole family tree one day. And one of the things I noticed is that there were little blue dots on every single ancestor on my mom's side of the tree. And there were no blue dots on my dad's side of the tree. And those little blue dots, what that means is that you have a DNA match who also has that person in their tree. So I'm looking at this thinking, how can I have a blue dot on every single ancestor on my mom's tree and no blue dots on my dad's side of the tree? How is that possible? Like it's possible that nobody on his side of his family has ever taken a DNA test, but it's not probable, right? Because I literally have thousands of DNA matches on my mom's side of the tree. So this is when, at this moment, it started to dawn on me that what I was looking at here, that there might be a possibility that the man that raised me and whose name is on my birth certificate is not my actual biological father. I didn't know it for sure, but this is when I first, like, I could feel it. It was like almost like my body was ahead of my brain in this moment. Like I started shaking. You know how like little chihuahuas just sort of shake constantly? I just, at this moment, just started shaking. It was like, oh my God. Although my brain was still like not there yet. So I then go into there's an area in the Ancestry site where you can just search through your DNA matches by name. So I'm frantically searching my matches by my dad's last name, which is still my name. So I guess my maiden name. I'm searching by my paternal grandmother's maiden name, my paternal great grandmother's maiden name, like any name I could remember from my dad's side of the tree. I am searching on those surnames and I couldn't find anybody in my matches with these names. So I was just like, started shaking more, right? Like I was just dumbfounded. So, but that's not like enough proof, right? Like it wasn't enough for me. So, this is when I started to like phone a friend, right? Like thank God for my friends because I have two really close friends and I started texting with them and I'm like explaining this to them and they're like, oh my God, what's happening? And they ended up kind of helping me through the next couple of days figuring this out because I had a few moments where I'm like, am I losing my mind? Like, what am I looking at here? I was doubting myself. I kind of slept on it that night, after noticing the blue dots and noticing that nobody in my DNA matches had the names that they should have had. The next morning, right after I woke up, I remembered out of the blue a conversation I had had with a cousin. So, about 3 or 4 years ago, before COVID, my first cousin on my dad's side of the family came to visit me. And she brought her daughter with her, who would be my first cousin once removed. And her daughter at the time was in college. And her daughter was telling me that she had taken a DNA test on Ancestry. And she was telling me this because she discovered some stuff on the other side of her family tree that she didn't expect. And this was like a 5-minute conversation that we had had 3 or 4 years before. And it was interesting. And I haven't thought about it since then, but it popped into my head. And I remembered that my cousin's daughter had taken a DNA test. And this is on my dad's birth certificate, father's side of the family. So I went and looked her up. I did a member search in the tool and I found her. She also has an unusual, uncommon name. I found her and it said not a DNA match. So at that point, I'm like, oh my God, my dad isn't my dad. I mean, I was just like, I don't know. I was just in such shock. At that point, I didn't need any more proof other than knowing that my first cousin once removed on his side of the family is not showing up as a DNA match. That's kind of all the proof I needed. So, so it's like I figured out that side of the equation. Like I figured out the dad side of the equation, meaning, that's why this isn't making sense. I need to go back over here and look at Linda again because I think she's my aunt because probably one of her brothers is my father. She has 2 brothers, Linda does. And I quickly figured out that one of her 2 brothers is actually too young to be my father. He would have been like 9 years old when I was conceived. Mm. So it had to be the brother that went to high school with my mom, who she said she had a crush on. Yeah. So now I'm like, okay, I went back to the obituary. I got his name. And so the man that I think is maybe my biological father, he has like the most common name you could ever have. It's like John Smith. That's not his name, but that's like how common it is. So I'm like, oh gosh, how am I going to find him? I got to see what he looks like. But I figured, my mom's on Facebook and there's a lot of alumni, like high school alumni stuff happening on her page a lot. And so I thought, well, if he is on Facebook, I might be able to find him like through their alumni group. So I go on Facebook and I type in his very common name and he pops up and he is friggin' Facebook friends with my mom. Like they're Facebook friends. And I'm like, wow, that was easy and weird. So I click on his profile and, it's obvious that he doesn't use Facebook very frequently. Like I could see that he hadn't posted anything for like 6 years or something. But he had a picture up and I'm looking at his face and it's actually a really close up picture of his face. And I'm like, I don't look like this guy. There's no way, so I took a screenshot of his face, of his Facebook profile picture, and I texted it to one of my friends. And I'm like, I don't look like this guy, but I think this might be him. And she texted me back like 5 minutes later and she's like, Stephanie, I've been sitting here staring at his face for 5 minutes. And he is absolutely your father. There is no way that you look just like him. It's like I didn't want to see it. He and I have very different eyes, like different eye color and different eye shape. But the whole rest of my face, like my nose, my mouth, the shape of my face, everything else looks like him. Mm. And I just knew it. And again, back to my like kind of knowing things in your body. I just kind of knew it when I looked at him, I resisted it at first, but I was like, wow. And then I could also see on his Facebook page where he works. He's a college professor and I could see the name of the university where he works. So that made it really easy for me to find his contact information because I just Googled his name, his very common name, and his university, and like his little professor page popped up with like a list of the classes he teaches and his office hours and his mobile phone number and his office phone number and his email and everything. It was like all right there. So at this point, I'm, this is like this is Christmas Eve, and I have to kind of like keep my shit together for my kids, right? Because I'm in shock. But we need to have a nice Christmas, I'm not going to tell them what's going on until I figure out what's really happening here. So we get up the next morning and we're like opening presents and everything. And my mom's calling me, like she keeps calling me like every 15 or 20 minutes because normally she would be here with us on Christmas. And because of COVID, she isn't. And she desperately wants to hear how things are going. And did the kids like their presents? And, and I just could not answer the phone because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to like cry or scream or laugh or fall mute and not be able to speak. I just turned my phone off. And, my kid's dad and I are not together, but we're good friends. And usually the way we do Christmas is they have Christmas morning with me and we open presents. He comes over, we have brunch together, and then they go to his house in the afternoon for Christmas part 2, which is awesome because that means I usually get like a quiet house on Christmas afternoon and I can like clean up and take a nap,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you just got to make it through. And then this afternoon the kids will leave and then you can freak out. So the kids, we had a brunch, I made it through, and I just laid in the middle of the pile of wrapping paper in my living room and stared at the ceiling for like an hour after they left. Cause I almost think like my nervous system was shot from like holding this in. And I just stared at the ceiling and like every thought that you could imagine was like racing through my mind. Like, what do I say to my mom? How do I confront her? Do I even want to reach out to my birth father or not? How do I tell my birth certificate father? Like all these things are running around in my head. Right. So I finally called my mom back that afternoon and I kind of gave myself a little pep talk before I called her. Cause I really love my mom and we've always been very close. But I wasn't really sure how this was going to go. And she knew I took the DNA test. So I was hoping that she maybe figured I would figure this out at some point, right? Like hopefully she was bracing herself. So I call her and, I start out by telling her I love her and I understand. Like I let her know. I'm like, I let her know what I figured out. I'm like, I think this guy is actually my biological father, your friend from high school, not the man that raised me. And I was like, look, I get it. I was 19 years old too. I certainly like had my party days and I can only imagine what it was like to be 19 years old and not be married and become pregnant. Right. I get that, but I need to know what happened. Like, what do you have to say? And she just went straight into denial. Like it was weird. She acknowledged that she believes the DNA tests are accurate and she believes in science. But at the same time, she was just flat out denying that she ever slept with the man that I thought was my birth father. That clip of Bill Clinton in like the late 90s when he was like doing a press conference or something during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And he was like wagging his fingers going, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. That's pretty much what she sounded like. I did not ever sleep with him, ever. And I'm like, well, okay, but you can't say you believe in the DNA and then say that you didn't sleep with him because the DNA is showing that he is my biological father. Like there's no other way to look at this. So I explained to her in painstaking detail how I figured this out. Like everything I just said here on this podcast in the last 20 minutes, I explained all of that to her. So she really understood like every which way you slice it, whether you look at it from, my dad's side of the family or your side of the family, there's just no other explanation. And we just went in circles for like an hour and didn't get anywhere. So I'm like, look, why don't you go take a walk, confide in your husband or your sister or a friend or do what you need to do to process this. I'll do the same. And then call me back when you're ready to have like an honest conversation about this, whether it's in 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, whatever. So when I got off the phone with her, I was sort of doubting myself again. I'm like, oh my God, did I just accuse my mom of something that isn't true? Did I look at this wrong? And at this point, I had already gotten into the NPE friends group on Facebook, and I had seen a post about the DNA angels. And I'm like, I have to, before I go forward with this any further and push my mom or reach out to my birth father, I need to be 1,000% sure that I'm right. So I reached out to the DNA angels and they were amazing. Within an hour or two, they had somebody assigned to my case. And probably within an hour of giving the DNA angel access to my information, she came back at me and she's like, yep, you did it right. You figured it out. She's like, any way you want to look at it. And she ran like 3 or 4 sort of models of possibilities. And she's like, there's basically no question that this woman, Linda, is a full aunt, and one of her brothers is your biological father.
Hmm.
So that was a little bit like getting another gut punch because, I had a kind of a professional telling me that what I'd already found out. So, so then I set out to write an email to send to my birth father. And I probably spent hours writing what ended up being a very simple, like 5-sentence email. And I just said, hey, I'm the daughter of so-and-so. And I named my mom, your old classmate from high school. And I took a DNA test, and I have a lot of DNA in common with your sister. And I named his sister. And I think you and I need to talk. And so he wrote me right back, like within an hour, he responded. And he was like, lovely. He was like, it's nice to hear from you. I have fond memories of your mom and our childhood together, and I would be more than happy to talk to you. So we made a date to talk on January 1st, 2021. I don't know why. I'm not normally a superstitious person, but I'm like, 2020 has been so bizarre. Like, let's just kick off 2021 with our first phone call. So it was amazing. Like, he and I had instant rapport on the phone. And I told him about my discovery. And he said, he told me everything, basically. He said, your mom and I were great friends all through childhood, and we traveled in the same circles, like in high school. And he said, we weren't dating or anything. Your mom and I went to a concert. He's like, one of the reasons I remember the night that we spent together was we went to go to a concert, and the concert was Jose Feliciano, and Led Zeppelin was the opening act, because they hadn't really made it big yet. And he's like, I remember this concert because we were so blown away by Led Zeppelin. And then sure enough, the next year, Led Zeppelin really hit it big, and they started playing like big stadiums. But this night that I was conceived, they were still unknown really here in the US. And they were the opening act, and they were playing at like a really small venue somewhere in Ohio. So my birth father's told all of his friends about me. And actually one of his friends found the concert poster from that tour that he's sending to me, which is cute. Anyway, but he's like, your mom and I really just sort of had one night together, and we weren't dating or anything. And she was dating my dad, my birth certificate father. So my birth father remembered meeting my birth certificate father. They weren't friends, but they all kind of hung out in the same circles. So anyway, it was just one night, and they didn't really see each other after that. However, he said when I was about 3 or 4 years old, he ran into me and my mom at a donut shop. And he said, being old friends from high school, he and my mom sat down and had a cup of coffee. And they hadn't seen each other for a few years. And I was running around, like a 3 or 4-year-old running around in this donut shop while they were having coffee. And he said, I don't remember much from the late 60s and early 70s because, those were his party days. But he's like, I remember being transfixed by you and thinking, oh my God, that kid looks like my sister. But he didn't say anything to my mom, and she didn't say anything to him. Right? So, and that was the one and only time he ever saw me. And he's like, I had that strong intuitive hit, but I just didn't say anything, and neither did she. And at that point, might have been for the best that nobody said anything, because my mom was married to my dad at this point. I was attached to my dad, my birth certificate father, and it just would have blown up a lot of lives if they had tried to I don't even know if you could get to the bottom of it. I don't even know what paternity tests existed in 1973 or 74. So that was, so when he got my email, he wasn't totally completely shocked and taken off guard, right? Because he remembered that time when he saw me in the donut shop and the feeling he got when he saw me. So since then, he and I have built an amazing relationship. He never had children. He's been married to the same woman for 45 years, and he never had children. And what makes me sad about this, he told me that his whole life he's had friends and colleagues and students tell him that it's too bad he never had kids because he would have been the greatest dad. And so it makes me sad that he's only now getting that opportunity 50 years in. Because I now that I'm getting to know him, I think he really would have been an amazing dad. He's lovely. And he's thrilled about this whole thing. He is thrilled to have a daughter and 2 grandchildren all of a sudden. And so he and we talk all the time. So I live in San Francisco. I live literally right smack in the middle of the city. And I've lived here for 15 years. And he has also lived in the Bay Area basically his whole adult life. So we've lived within an hour of each other for the past 15 years. And sadly, last August, about 4 or 5 months before I made this discovery, his house burned down in one of the fires. He lived out on a ranch about an hour and 15 minutes outside of San Francisco. And, we've had a lot of really bad forest fires over the last few years here, and one of them burned his house down. And so just months before I figured this out, he and his wife moved a couple states over. So now he's about 15 hours drive away. So, but he came out in June. He drove out here and he met me and the kids, and we spent, a few days together, and it was amazing. And we talk all the time. I'm actually at this point closer to him, I think, than I am my mom or my birth certificate father. And it's interesting because when I first made this discovery, I was so focused on what features of mine look like his, like physically, like how do I resemble him and the rest of the family? But what's really blowing my mind is how much like him I am, like my personality. I mean, this is a man I've never met before. He's a complete stranger, but we are so alike personality wise, and our interests and just like how we operate in the world is so similar. That's more mind blowing to me than the fact that I look like him. So that part of this is amazing. And my Aunt Linda, the one who sort of was the key to all of this, she's been warm and welcoming as well. I mean, she sent me bunches of pictures, and I've talked to her on the phone a few times, and the whole family is just really thrilled about it. So I feel really, really grateful for that. I did call my birth certificate father, and I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I made this discovery, and I told him, and he's like, I already knew. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you already knew? He, back in 2017, when I took that 23andMe test, I mentioned it to him, and he said, well, how Swedish are you? And I was like, I don't know. And I looked it up, and it said I was 10% Swedish. But it also said I was 30% broadly Northern European. So I just didn't think that was weird. It didn't raise any red flags for me, but it did for him. And I didn't know this. He never told me this, but he actually went and talked to somebody, like a genealogist, and asked them. And he said, if I'm 50% Swedish, because he's 50% Swedish, what percentage Swedish would one of my children be? And they're like, well, probably 25%. If your daughter's only 10% Swedish, then she's probably not your biological child. So he kind of already figured this out, and he didn't say anything to me for 4 years. I'm like, what? So he's like, oh, I figured you might have already figured this out yourself, and you just didn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, wow, that just blew my mind. And I asked him, I said, well, when I was a child, did you ever just stop and look at me and think, oh my God, this kid is so not mine? He's like, no, I never did. I never, ever, ever questioned whether you were mine. Mm-hmm. So, and then he proceeded to say all the right things to me. He said, I love you. You're still my daughter. This changes nothing. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't. So yeah. So I'm in a really good place. I mean, I know I'm one of the fortunate NPEs. Everybody's alive. I know exactly what happened. I'm building a great relationship with my birth father and the rest of his family. My birth certificate father's cool about it. He and my mom have been divorced for 30 years, so it's not like it's going to impact their marriage or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still a little, I'm at an impasse with my mom, right? She still can't kind of take responsibility for her part in this, and she can't really come clean. I think it's one of those things where she just told herself, it's like that quote, there's like a famous quote, and it's like, if you want to hide the truth, you need to hide it from yourself. Or if you want to keep a secret, you need to keep it from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think she accepts all of this now. She knows that I'm talking to my birth father and that's going well. And it's just accepted as a fact that he is now, that he's my birth father. But I just don't think she's able yet. She's still sort of imprisoned in her original lie, and she can't get out of it. So I've suggested a number of times to her that maybe she should go to therapy and kind of try to work through this on her own. And I still talk to her. I mean, my kids adore her, and I'm not going to cut her out of my life or anything. But, things aren't the same with her.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating that when you were about 3 or 4 years old, you actually briefly met your birth father in the donut shop. I
I
mean,
know.
just a lot of people don't have that. I mean, it sounds like he didn't know though at the time that
I
you
don't
were.
remember. I don't have any memory of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. He was just some guy, like I didn't know. But, he remembers it. So that's kind of special for
Wow.
him.
You also mentioned the DNA angels. I will make sure and put that reference in the Facebook group. They're mentioned frequently. This is a volunteer group. They help so many people for free, just as volunteers, help figure out the centimorgans and the shared matches. And I will add that to the
Yeah.
resource list. Now,
They
was
were
that you?
amazing. And like in my case, I really had already figured it out, and they just helped
Yep.
me validate what I was looking at before I went and started telling everybody.
You really did figure this out. I mean, that's the blue dots, the
Yeah.
family tree. Wow. Gosh. It's almost like you're able to slowly come into this information. I mean, it's just so shocking finding out something like this. It's so shocking. And you piece this together, it sounds like yourself. And then you just got confirmation from the DNA angels.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how it worked out. I just kind of knew it in my body. Like those few days that it took me to get to that point where had a DNA angel confirming everything. There's, I don't know. I just think there's like a knowing in our bodies, not to get too woo woo, but I think I just knew it was true in my heart,
Yes.
maybe. Yeah.
Yes. This is that point where I nod along in the story. Steph, that is exactly how I felt. When I took because I did 23andMe and then 4 months later finally did Ancestry. And as the results were coming, I'm like, I just kind of started to feel it. Like there was just a feeling in the body. You explained that perfectly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I read Dani Shapiro's book Inheritance, which I loved. And
Mm-hmm.
in that she talks about this concept in psychology called the unthought known. And that really struck me as, the unthought known is basically that like you can know something kind of almost like at a cellular level or a soul
Mm-hmm.
level, but you can't think it in your brain. Like it's not an available thought, but you just sort of know it. And that's exactly what this all felt like, even though I didn't know and I was shocked. I just think my body kind of, the good part of it is I felt almost like I became aligned when I figured this out. Like like at a cellular level, there was an alignment, so.
You actually have some similarities with Dani Shapiro's story. I was thinking of Inheritance, the book. I'll put that in the notes as well.
Mhm.
When you were talking, because you both have biological fathers that are professors, and
Oh,
you sense like the mannerisms, and you connected with, you have the same, you used your own wordings, but you said you had similar mannerisms and way of speaking, connecting, and that's how she felt when she first saw her biological father in, I think,
yeah.
versus in a YouTube video, she saw him. But yeah, that's amazing. The biology of it all. Amazing.
Yeah.
Steph, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to reach out to you, could they do that? How could they do that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would love to connect with anybody that wants to talk. You can reach me on email. I have an email. It's I'll spell it. It's GenRelational at gmail.com. So that's genrelational@gmail.com. I'll spell it again. GEN as in Nancy, RELATION as in Nancy, AL at gmail.com.
I get it. Genrelational at
Mm-hmm.
gmail.com. And you said you really welcome, like you want to connect with other NPEs.
Yeah. I mean, if people have questions about my story or they want to share their story and they just need somebody to listen, because I think there's so much benefit in telling your story. Again, shout out to my friends who have listened to me talk about this many, many times since the discovery. I think there's so much in that. So I'm happy to be a listener.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to share this with me. And I will put in Dani Shapiro's, referencing her book. I'll put the DNA Angels. I'll put in your email address.
Okay.
And any other references we talked about. But thank you for doing this today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Lily. I really was happy to be here.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.